approximately 20 million dwelling units, one end of the requirement in the rural area, approximately 40 million dwelling units required in the urban area. All is going to go up. It's expected over the next 5 years' time, this is going to be anywhere close to 70 to 100 million dwelling units that are required if we don't attack this kind of an issue. Given that, so you see the major issue in terms of the housing gap. Question number one is, can you build more with less resources? So that's one basic question of decoupling that is being looked at. They call this resource decoupling. The second kind of decoupling that one is looking at is in terms of impact decoupling. Can you use the same quantum of material but reduce the negative environmental impacts?
We are looking at the increasing rate of consumption for shelter in growing cities primarily. That's become the main focus because the way we are forced to build in cities is different from the way we can build very simply in small towns or in villages. And it is because of that situation that there's suddenly a jump in consumption of material for shelter that's produced for people. Okay. And I do believe that the kind of shelter that can be produced is a function of the way the city is planned and its developmental control and the way it makes land available for shelter. And I think that is a primary determinant, believe it or not, for the potential of decoupling. It's the city regulations, the city plan, the city management that determines what efficiencies you can get at the level of building construction building design.
We are also following a particular political economy in which development is assumed to be linked to consumption of resources. So the elected representatives don't brook any argument with the fact that, hey, we have to develop and our country is being held back and so on and so forth, and therefore we must consume resources in order to, of course, this sounds a little hollow, but in order to raise all our population to a higher quality of life and so on. So this assumption of the resource-intensive development model as being really the right choice for India is something which is going to be a tough nut to crack if you look at it from an advocacy point of view. Linked with this, of course, is I find completely insane preponderance of a particular kind of technology. Again, this is not something that I have observed uniquely. It's there in the literature, what I call the RCC default. It's really become sort of the easiest choice for even the urban poor to exercise because it's become so easy to go to the neighborhood shop, buy some steel which may actually not be the correct kind of steel, buy cement and may not be the correct grade of cement, and just sort of dump them into some kind of formwork and raise a structure overnight. So this RCC default is something that is very worrying. In all of this, we also have the opacity of data. We just actually don't know enough about this whole phenomenon. So what the Nightlight study by the World Bank simply highlights for us, flags for us, is that, hey, you're not really measuring your organization well enough.
I think it's important to ensure that there is diversity in approaches that are taken to housing in India. Whether that's diversity in terms of design, whether that's diversity in terms of use of technology, whether that's diversity in terms of combining IT with smart technology, etc. I think diversity is important. And if you have the formula for that diversity right, then you're actually encouraging innovation. Now, particularly in the housing sector, I think most Indians would probably use their own home or their own house as a single most important investment they make in their lifetime. And if that is true, then there is a vested interest in the homeowner or the person who's buying the house to ensure that whatever goes into it, again, the experience of this building, I think is proof of the pudding. There was a strong process of engagement with the users of this building. There was a strong process in understanding what the users require, and I think Ashok used the word, the brief is very good. So if that process of participation continues from the start through to the feedback processes, I think you've got something to start working on.
I thought I would pose certain inherent contradictions that we confront as we approach this problem of the resource constraints in the face of expanding populations asking for better shelter. In the context of cities, one of the things that happens is that as you need to become more compact in the growth of the city, which is what this intervention is all about, smart city, convergence and compactness so that infrastructural system, transportation, and all the other efficiencies that the city can afford are better met by compact forms of cities, are tending to, especially when you are trying to meet existing densities in the poor settlements in the big cities, are tending to produce an outcome which is what we call high density, high rise typologies of building. Tending to produce. We've seen this in Mumbai. We were about to see this in Delhi. We managed to push it back. But we can see that if you look at the regulations that are written for affordable housing, or regulations to promote affordable housing, whether it is Maharashtra, whether it is Uttar Pradesh, whether it is Haryana, now Delhi, they all imagine that it is going to be high-rise, high-density. That's the imagination. When you build tall, you spend much more steel. When you build tall, you spend much more space in order to make those buildings secure and serviceable. When you build tall, you spend much more time in completing those buildings. When you build tall, you're further away. I mean, there are many other reasons. But and in the operation of the buildings, now we have statistics, research has been concluded, that compared to 4 or 5 story buildings, DDA flats in and around the city, 8-story buildings, general 8-story buildings, Pakkarganj, Dwarka, the average bill of the community is 15% higher in direct city, 15% higher. And it's entirely due to common services, lifts, and pumping of water. So you have an inherently more expensive way of living in terms of the carbon impact. So here's a contradiction. High density, but you have to find an optimal, low carbon form of development. Another contradiction is that if you want to be resource efficient, it's not as though you can build only out of recycled material, because populations are growing and the demand for space is growing. So even if you were to recover from what already exists, and if densities are already so high, you cannot recover enough material from that to produce more space. I think that will be really, going into some science fiction. You will be wanting to use more material. Now, if you want to produce more space at lesser material cost, it calls for greater precision and greater efficiency in design, in production technologies, and in the utilization of all the services. Much greater efficiency. There's a contradiction. Greater efficiency, greater precision requires higher skills. You cannot achieve greater efficiency and greater precision without higher skills.
When we are talking about resource use and the kind of capture areas, the territories the cities uses in order to get the resources to be built, to be run, and so on. There are all types of attempts, of course, nowadays, by efficiency, by new technologies, by new thinking, by smart thinking, to reduce this capture area. But what do you think? Thinking very radically, how far can this go? Is a city possibly imaginable that actually lives off the resources that are just available on its own territory? Or is that a completely nuts idea?
One other thing I would add is that we need to drop a few dogmas that we've developed about how these processes work. The anti-urbanization idea, right, aligns itself with a very romantic notion of the Indian village, extremely romantic. Gandhi was borrowing from Ruskin when he was, reacting to the idea of industrialization and modernization, but the Indian village is not that wonderful, idyllic place from which nobody would like to flee. So most of the migration into our cities is distress migration. It is migration that chooses a different alternative where alternatives are available for people who live in depravities of the kind that most of us don't even know, right? So that's another dogma we should drop. The other one is this whole business about aspirations to houses in cities. Most of the city dwellers of this country live in one room, and that's families of a minimum of 4 people, right? So when we knock aspiration, understand that you're actually knocking somebody's desire to simply have one more room in their house, right? And that one room, that second room does not come easy, okay? So I think we need to drop some of these romantic notions we have that we hold on to, as if we can reverse this, this momentum, which is not driven simply by state policy. It is also driven by people moving to cities, seeking better lives, and a lot of them do find them, and therefore they continue to bring more and more people to cities.
My, observation pretty much is that we have the intelligence about what needs to be done. We're talking about collecting the data. We're talking about all the metrics which we understand. But does the person who is actually building the houses, or the builder, or the person who is accountable or has to do work on the ground, does he know? Is there any requirement on that person to do it? The National Building Code, the Energy Conservation Building Code, they exist, but why are they voluntary?
Decoupling material resources and all these sustainability topics are being already covered under National Action Plan on Climate Change. NFPC has that sustainable habitat as also one of the missions. So from the government side, I would like to know a little bit about the achievements of under that mission.
We just completed a very careful survey of building materials and building technology resources in NCR, Chandigarh, Haryana, and Punjab in this region. This is on behalf of the BMTPC, and we were asked to do this, and we were given the instruction that there is this list of 8 technologies that the ministry has picked on for housing for all. So would you please also look at them, because some of these manufacturers or providers of these technology are located in this region. Would you please look at them carefully? So we looked at everything, and we did what Zinat says, we did an environmental costing, a very rough environmental costing for all the technological materials and technological options that are available to us. And we came to this conclusion that all those modern technologies that are supposed to be fast and efficient and so on are environmentally very negative, all of them. And they are inherently, in rupee terms also, very costly. So whoever is trying to sell them hasn't got it right. And whoever is trying to think of that as a solution also hasn't got it right. But what we did find, very interesting, was that if you actually produced hollow bricks by mining from below the surface of the soil, you have a very sustainable system for providing low-cost shelter and a technology that almost everybody knows how to use. And with that, if you use a little bit of reinforcement going up to 4 or 5 stories high, you actually get a very resource-efficient, sustainable, low-carbon, even in the long term, method of building, which would be affordable and accessible. Another material that turned up was actually a high performance, well-engineered concrete block, hollow concrete block.
My advice would be, continuing on the 3 Ds, continue with diversity of approaches, try to connect the disconnects, and keep the debate going. Because you don't have just the one answer. It's not a prescriptive approach, so you have to keep the debate going.
3 of the more important issues that we've got to take away. One is to do with this word smart cities. Smart cities is not a goal, it's a means. It's not something that we want to aspire to as an end in itself. It's a means to a city that is humane, that brings up its children in a creative environment, that excites the imagination and lives of its inhabitants. But smartness is just a means of getting there. In a Jane Jacobs sense, cities are the crucibles of innovation, of new thinking. Virtually everything that is happening through civilization that we recall as a major part of our lives comes from cities. Cities are not bad things, they're terrific things. But cities are not the only things. And Ashoka has made a very strong case for the need for distribution of their cities. There are people who want to live in villages, and there are other people who want to live in cities. And the important thing is to make those choices available for everyone. The title of this particular trialogue was about material resources. I think we've covered a lot of good ground on that. But there are numerous contradictions of the kind that Jagan described, 3 or 4. And one of them is that the city inherently is a very durable artifact of civilization. It lasts for 50, 80, 100, 150 years. And it has what is called a lock-in period. And if you invest in a city in a way that you basically get locked in, you forget the fact that today, in the 21st century, society is changing incredibly rapidly in terms of not only possibilities and opportunities, but aspirations. So if you basically don't allow for the need for flexibility, for recycling, for making sure that the resources that you invest in a city are actually changeable, have the ability to conform to changing needs and aspirations and desires, you are actually preventing your next generation from being able to live in a smart city. Sustainability, by definition, means is the least cost overall of all new choices. So we've got to get it right. I mean, the word sustainable isn't meaningful unless we understand that it is the one that lasts the longest, precisely because it's the cheapest.